MyGreat28 Series. My name is Woodson Gardner, and I am just your host and basically slide advancer for our incredible health panel. And tonight is a very special night because we're going to hear from all three doctors on the health panel, which makes it a lot of fun. So we're going to get right to it. We are going to kickstart with Dr. Mike, and I love the title of what he wrote. So you fell off the wagon. And tell us what you are talking about, Dr. Mike, and how can we get back on track?
Absolutely. Woodson, can you hear me okay?
Hear you loud and clear.
Okay, very good. So you fell off the wagon. Guess what? It's human nature. You're part of the human race, and it does happen. The good news is it does not have to be permanent. The better news is you only really need 3 days to get back on track. And if you'll pay attention to that number, those 3 days, that happens to be a recurring theme with this program. When you hit a sugar bomb, it will take 3 days to reset. When you need to reload and get back on track, it will take another 3 days. When you first got started on the program, the induction phase with food was 3 days. So what you need to do is hit the reset button. We're going to talk about the things that you can do and should do if you haven't done them yet in order to actually hit the reset button. We're going to talk about fast foods. We're going to talk about the water. We've talked about the sugar bombs, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more because, unfortunately, this probably represents the most insidious, hidden, but pervasive problem that people run into. And then we're going to talk about the vitamins and the minerals and nutrition, how it plays a role. We're going to talk about the drops. And lastly, we will circle back with the detox system. So let's talk about fast foods. If you're still eating fast food, stop eating it already. Why? Number one, it shows a lack of commitment on your part. If you're still seriously considering fast food as a viable option, there's a lack of commitment, there's a lack of being fully involved in the program. I was interviewed for a local, well, it used to be a local wellness magazine, now it's gone nationwide, Fit In Online. And one of the questions asked of me was, well, Dr. Mike, simplify things for people. What's the one piece of good advice they can take to help with their health? And my answer was very, very simple. Eat real food. There is no way anyone today will argue the fact that fast foods represent real food. They're not. They're processed proteins. Yes, they may come from animal sources, but they're full of all kinds of different things, fillers, substitutes, extenders, whatever you want to call them, including things that are not fit for human consumption. So if you're still eating fast food, and one of the things that we're trying to get you to do is eat real food, well, you're not eating real food. Secondly, you're actually consuming a fair number of toxins by eating the fast food. And third, have you ever noticed when you eat a fast food meal that as much as it satisfies your cravings, within about an hour and a half to 2 hours tops, you're jonesing for more of the same stuff? It has to do with the fact that there are sugars used as extenders in the fast foods, and they trigger the insulin release, and Dr. Greg will be touching on that in greater detail later, but the net result is it leaves you hungrier than ever before. So for any number of different reasons, if you're still eating fast foods, stop. Stop it already. Moving on to the next item. 100 ounces of water per day. And understand, this is if you are 200 pounds or less. If you're above 200 pounds, you have to take any weight above the 200, divide that by half, and consume that number in ounces of water on top of the 100. All right, so why so much water? Number one, most Americans are walking around in a state of mild to moderate chronic dehydration. What happens as we age, we confuse thirst and hunger. We're really thirsty, we're moderately dehydrated, but what we end up doing is we reach for food. And the ironic situation is water is actually essential for digestion of food. So we're already dehydrated, we eat more food that needs more water for digestion, but we're still short on the water. So have some water first. Before you eat anything, have some water first. If in fact your brain, your body is telling you that you're thirsty, well, give the body what it needs first, drink the water. If after 10, 15, 20 minutes stops, you're still hungry, then yes, go ahead and eat something. Number 2, we are trying to flush away fat with water. And fat is simply a solid form of oil, and oil and water typically do not mix. So we need a lot of water to flush things through. Third, a lot of the toxins that are stored in the fat will be released, and they will need to be flushed out of the body. And again, that's going to happen with the water. So if you're not drinking 100 ounces of water per day, or more depending on your starting weight, and you're not having the success that you want, or you started with 100 ounces of water and then you decided that you didn't need that much water, and now all of a sudden your weight loss has plateaued, well, this is the reason why. Get back on the 100 ounces per day. It will take your body 3 to 5 days to readjust to the volume of fluid being consumed. And no, you will not be spending all day in the bathroom. You will actually get to the point where your body says, oh, we have extra water, we're going to keep the water now. Moving on to the next slide. If you haven't yet noticed, or if you haven't learned about the sugar bombs, go find the video that shows the sugar bombs. Sugar bombs are basically sugars hidden in food. And these include sugars labeled as sugar, as well as a whole host of other things that we might consider to be healthy, but are actually not. And what the sugar bomb does, you consume a processed sugar, you consume an excess amount of sugar, and all of a sudden your body is pushed into fat storage mode. We were never designed to handle large amounts of sugar, physiologically speaking. And when we are exposed to large amounts of sugar, as we find in so many foods today, our body attempts to store the excess energy in the form of fat. So if you're following the program, you think to the best of your ability, and you find yourself either plateaued out or you start creeping up, and it's fat weight, not muscle weight, it might well be that you're consuming a fair amount of sugars unconsciously. And therefore, you need to go find these sugars, hunt them down, and eliminate them from your diet. Because every time you consume a sugar bomb, your weight loss will stop for 3 days. It will take your body 3 days to recover from a single sugar bomb. So the flip side of that is, one of the worst things that you can do is to consume a sugar bomb every other day. Because basically your body never recovers. It takes 3 days. So you basically go from sugar bomb to sugar bomb to sugar bomb, and your body never gets back into the fat loss mode. So if you've noticed that you've plateaued, or that the weight seems to be creeping back up again, and you've tried a whole host of other things, you need to start paying attention to nutritional labels. Now, the good news is we will have an upcoming webinar dealing specifically with identifying, reading these labels, and identifying sources of hidden sugar. Now, the vitamins and the minerals, this is one of those things that people ask somewhat with disbelief in their voice. Do I really need to take these, and twice a day? How come so much? Well, the answer, as is usually the case, comes from several different facets. Number one, food today does not have the nutritional value that food 50, 60, 100 years ago had. It has been estimated that in order to get the nutritional value from a single orange from about 60 to 70 years ago, you would have to consume between 3 and 5 oranges today. It has to do with the fact that so many plots of land undergo what's called monoculture. Only one plant is produced from that patch of soil. And so the minerals are essentially leached out of the soil, and the plants are sustained strictly by the administration of fertilizers. Now, that's all well and good. It makes the plant grow. It bears the fruit or whatever the produce might be. But the trace minerals and elements that constitute the whole picture of nutrition is not there anymore. So we have to supplement by taking vitamins and minerals. Secondly, why twice a day? Those of you who have tried to drink from a fire hose knows that you have an abundance of water, but you can't actually get any into your mouth because it's coming at you too strong, too fast. Same thing happens when you take too many vitamins and minerals once a day. Your body can only absorb and use a fixed amount of these things. And if you try to flood your body with all of it all at one time, basically most of it gets dumped into the toilet. So by taking the vitamins and the minerals twice a day, you are giving the body at a manageable pace what it needs. And so the body then takes what it can and takes what it can use and gets a chance to use more of it because it's not being overwhelmed. Lastly, the strange thing about obesity, the strange thing about being overweight is that from a medical standpoint, it is a form of malnutrition. And therefore, we have to supply nutrients to the individual who is trying to lose weight because they are, by definition, malnourished. And then we come to the box of drops. And it was interesting because we had a client refer a friend to the office this past week, and when she called up, she said, "Sandy told me to call you for the box of magic drops." So the Slendrix and the Accelerate are the core of what makes this program work. Lots of people think that having started it and started with the weight loss, that they can start diminishing the use and or not use the drops at some point in the future. I have news for you all. You might get away with doing that for maybe at most a month, but at some point, because of the world we live in, we are exposed to toxins, we are exposed to temptations, our food is not as nutritionally sound as it should be. We undergo a fair amount of stress. Slendrix and Accelerate were designed specifically to address the core issues of what leads to eating too much, eating the wrong thing, and not being able to burn the calories properly. So it's interesting because there's a fairly well-decorated bodybuilder, fitness expert that lives in the western part of Florida. And she uses Slendrix and Accelerate despite the fact she does not need to lose any weight. But she uses it to keep her system balanced, to control the cravings, and to control the stress level. So Slendrix will help control how much you eat and what you eat, specifically the carbs. The Accelerate will help boost your metabolism so that you are using the food to the best that your body can, as well as you are not hitting that afternoon slump because of low energy. And then lastly, the Restorix. Yes, the dark green slurry is your friend. Quit being a baby. And the reason I put this up this way is because I have probably, in all the people that I have coached through the program, better than 85% of them come back and say, do I really need to use that stuff? Now, at the beginning, I would argue that they needed to, and I would encourage them that they should, and I would tell them that it was part of the whole program. But at some point, I just let things be, and people would quietly stop using the Restorix. And then about 3-4 weeks later, they'd go, you know, my weight loss has stopped, I can't get the hold of this, or, you know, things are heading in the wrong direction, or a whole host of other symptoms have shown up. And I just look at them, cock my head to one side, smile, and say, so tell me, when did you stop using the Restorix? And it's so funny because they look at me like, how did you know? Because we live in a very toxic world. We ingest and inhale these toxins on a daily basis. These toxins are fat soluble. To a large extent, people who have excess fat on their body and have been unable to shed the fat by exercising, by calorie restriction, is because the body is trying to keep us healthy. The toxins are stored in the fat, and the body refuses to let go of the fat. So you start losing some weight. You started on the Restorix as part of the whole program to begin with. And then you thought, you know what, I don't like the looks of it. I don't like the taste of it. It's so inconvenient. My schedule's a little crazy. So you start using it every other day or every third day, and the next thing you know, you're not using it at all. Well, at some point, the body says, no, we can't lose any more fat because the toxins are going to enter the circulation. We need to hold the fat. And it's the strangest thing. Every single one of those clients, when they hit that plateau, and I finally asked them the question, so tell me, when did you stop using the Restorix? Within 6 to 7 days of restarting the Restorix. Now understand, in that situation, I have them take the Restorix at double the usual dose because we're trying to play catch-up. But when they start using the Restorix, within 6 to 7 days, the weight loss starts back up again. It is the most amazing thing on this program. We truly have a product that can pull toxins out of your body. Why would you decide to not use that stuff on an ongoing basis? And I have said it on multiple times. The only time that you conceivably would not need to use Restorix ever again is if you somehow lived in a completely pristine world and you would not be exposed to any toxins of any sort anytime. Well, guess what? I haven't found that world yet, so I just had my Restorix about an hour and a half ago. So, okay, so we're going to switch gears slightly now, and we're going to talk about, if you have hit a plateau, what are the things you can do to get things going again? Number one, breakfast. If you are one of those individuals that skips breakfast or delays breakfast until you get to the office, well, you are setting yourself up for failure. It's a very interesting situation. When they look at a whole bunch of people who have a healthy weight, have good exercise habits, who have been able to lose weight, one of the most common characteristics that shows up on a regular basis is the fact that the majority of them eat breakfast. And mostly they eat protein for breakfast. Now, the bad news is most easily available breakfast foods in this country are in fact carbohydrates. And this includes pancakes, waffles, breakfast cereals. All these things are just carbs. What you really need to do is eat something that has protein. Now, if you're truly pressed for time, guess what we have available for you? The Pure Nourish shake. If need be, you could even make it the night before, put it in the fridge so you don't have to bother with making it in the morning. But if you don't eat breakfast, start eating breakfast. If you're eating mostly carbohydrates for breakfast, start eating protein. If you're one of those individuals who says, well, I get up in the morning and I'm just not hungry, you're right, because you're actually moderately dehydrated from not having had any fluid, any water, for 8 to 10 hours, depending on what time you went to bed. So here's something that I have counseled my patients for better than the last 20-some years. When you first get up in the morning, go drink a tall glass of water, 12, maybe 14 ounces of water. You don't have to guzzle it all down at one time, but just do that first. Before you even make your coffee, before you do anything, just have your water. And you'll be pleasantly surprised. 15 to 20 minutes later, as that water flushes through you, as the thirst mechanisms are shut off, the body now says, oh, guess what? We are hungry after all. Next, move it. If you are constipated, you need to get rid of the constipation. And yes, the water will help with that. Part of the reason why we need to get the bowel function optimized is a fair amount of the toxins are going to be trapped in bile and are going to show up in your stools. And if for any reason you're not moving on a regular basis, well, those toxins can be reabsorbed back into your body. So the ideal situation is as soon as your body sheds the fat and the toxin gets trapped and stored into your gastrointestinal tract, the ideal situation is the very next day it's going out into the sewer system. So if you are constipated, get something to fix it. If you're not drinking enough water, start drinking water. If you're not eating enough fiber in the form of vegetables, do so. If you are eating fruits and vegetables, but you're still somewhat constipated, you may want to use a fiber supplement. If having looked at all of those items and you're still having some degree of constipation, you may want to talk to your doctor about getting your thyroid function checked. Third, apples and more apples. If you're doing everything exactly right, you follow the program completely and things are still not quite moving the way they should, choose a day, one day, have the heaviest breakfast that you can imagine. And when I say heaviest, I'm talking about, steak and eggs, if that is your inclination. Have steak and eggs for breakfast, and then all throughout the day, you can have as many apples as you want, no restriction. You must drink the water that you're supposed to be drinking, and you must eat the apple, skin and all. Okay? Skin and all. Partly for the fiber. Secondly, there are active substances that are found at the junction between the skin and the flesh of the apple that will help trigger weight loss. So for one day, eat a big heavy breakfast, apples, 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 and as much water as you're supposed to be drinking, and then the following day go back to the program like before. Next item, coconut oil. And this is one of the most interesting and surprising aspects of this program. So everyone knows about olive oil being the healthy oil. And coconut oil for the longest time was the bad player on the field. I remember I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I remember a significant aspect, a significant component of the Philippine economy collapsed when coconut oil was deemed to be super, completely, totally unhealthy, because better than 60% of the Philippine economy at that time was coconut oil based. Well, guess what? Coconut oil is now the preferred oil. Number one, it is an oil that can cross into your brain by itself, and your brain can start using it rather than sugar. In other words, you don't have to use sugar to get your brain going. Number two, it actually, because of the type of fat found in coconut oil, it actually helps you lose weight. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's the way it goes. Third, coconut oil has been found to have surprising biologic properties against viruses, bacteria, and fungi. So for any number of different reasons, coconut oil is the way to go. And if you happen to cook a lot, coconut oil is actually more heat stable than olive oil. It's the better oil altogether. And lastly, Restorix. And I touched on this in the last slide in the prior segment. If you've hit a plateau and you've somehow decided or just got into the habit of not using the Restorix, go start back up on it again. But if you've hit a plateau and it was because you had stopped using the Restorix, what I said in the prior segment was, when I have my clients start back on the Restorix, I have them start back on it at double dose. Depending on their particular day, the schedules, their occupation, I may have them take 1 scoop of the Restorix in the morning and 1 scoop of Restorix in the evening. Or if their time is tight, if the schedules are tight, I just have them take 2 scoops all at one time. But again, if you've hit the plateau and you were losing weight before you hit the plateau, and you've decided to stop using the Restorix, get the Restorix back on board. It will get things moving the way they're supposed to. Okay? So those are the plateau busters. And like I said at the beginning, if you fell off the wagon, don't worry. It's perfectly normal and human. The good news is you can get back up again. It only takes 3 days.
Fantastic. I love that, especially the plateau busters, to just little tips and tricks to get back on track. And I know for me, I did fall off the wagon a little bit my first go-round, because it was just, there was so much hidden sugar in things that I was eating, I didn't realize I wasn't breaking my habit. And once I got on track and saw where those hidden things were, it was life-changing. So I love that training. I've learned something every single time I hear it. It was fantastic. So now we're going to switch gears, and we're going to hear from Dr. Elvira. Some questions and answers. These are actual questions from the field, the most commonly asked questions. We want more. So we are going to have Dr. Rios, Dr. Elvira answer some of these questions to keep us on track. And Dr. Elvira, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good evening. How is everybody tonight?
We are wonderful, and we are so anxious to hear from you. And here are our top picks. We'll just start with the first one. What are some good snack foods I can enjoy? Because some of us, like me, had never had anything other than Doritos, Oreos, Fritos, Cheerios. I told people I was on the O diet prior to MyGreat28. Everything I ate had an O in it. So
No.
what are some good healthy snack foods you can enjoy?
No kidding. I know a lot of people think that a bag of Doritos or Cheetos with Diet Coke is a great snack, and they keep doing these things forever and ever. But you know, once you start into MyGreat28, this is a learning experience for a lot of people, and even for us, we now live very hectic lifestyles, and we forget to go ahead and search for the right type of food. So this is a great opportunity. I always tell my patients that there are many snacks that people don't think they could be snacks. Who says that you could not chop bell peppers and put them in a Ziploc bag and take them to work and munch on those when you're getting hungry? Cucumbers are excellent for that as well. We can have green beans, baby asparagus. I usually tell everybody, take the opportunity to shop for everything you're going to eat the next week on a Saturday or Sunday. You organize what you're going to eat every day so you have an idea, and you have already part of your battle taken care of. Then your snacks are super important. So chop your bell peppers, your cucumbers, your baby asparagus, put them in Ziploc bags, divide them, and take them. Green beans, all that. Strawberries. You can have your strawberries, wash them, raspberries as well. Why do we need these foods? Because they're superfoods. They're great. They're full of vitamins, nutrients, and they have excellent properties that help us reduce inflammation, as we have spoken so many times of this during the MyGreat28 webinars. And there's a reason. We go back to the pH balance. We need to be in balance. The body is mostly alkaline and has that tendency to get us there. So what do? We eat the right type of fruits and vegetables and fruit that will get us into that balance. So take your snacks and make sure you make everything. Organize them on Sunday night so you can take them. Bell peppers. Oh, it's winter and it's cold. How about you like green tea? Great. Pair it with some lemon. Why lemon? Because it increases a powerful repairing, substance that is in there. It helps us repair some cells in our body. So consuming green tea, which you can, if it helps you block some of the heavy metals that go into your bloodstream if you're eating wrong things. But drinking it with lemon helps you lose weight and helps you feel better and increases good properties. Okay, apples. Apples are great. They're rich in an anti-inflammatory that is really good for the heart and for our health, the whole well-being. Sometimes, if you're ready on your weight, not necessarily now, and if your calories allow you to, you can have a little square of dark chocolate with your apple. Why? Because the dark chocolate also contains a powerful antioxidant, flavonoids, and that combination is a really good boost for you. So we have to learn about those superfoods like kiwi and Brussels sprouts, and sometimes a little bit of green olives help, and spinach and kale, avocado. All those are great foods that we can combine. And the fruits that help us, counting your calories, make sure you do portion control, and get the lower glycemic. That means the sugar, it's not going to be high. It's not going to get you out of balance. So your red apples, you're going to get your strawberries, your tomatoes. I live on cherry tomatoes. I put them in a Ziploc bag, and I'm munching those little tomatoes. Now you can get them, you know, heirloom little tomatoes, the cherry tomatoes, and you eat them and snack. They're rich in nutrients, and those are satisfying. So you feel that you're eating good food, but they help you as a snack. You do not have to reach for a candy bar. You do not have to reach for even a granola bar. Yes. Any other questions?
No, that's fantastic. That is so great to just have. There's so many different options, and once you use the system, those options are very satisfying. Okay, to follow up on that, here is a very common question we get. I heard you talk about sugar bombs, and I stick to the plan 90% of the time. Are those sugar bombs really why my results aren't as successful? I mean, I only cheat every once in a while. So talk about that just real quick, because the next question is the one that people really want to know about. But yeah, if you just cheat every once in a while and you do it every week, does that really make a difference?
Well, Dr. Mike just talked about that. Yes, it's going to make a difference. You can consume a little bit more fat, and you really won't gain a lot of weight if you're eating the right fat. But when you consume real sugar, you know, white, refined thing, you're not going to be able to lose the weight like you need to and you want to, because it's not going to work. You're going to be delayed. You're going to be cheating with those sugar bombs. You're going to delay, like Dr. Mike said, for about 3 days. You're going to produce certain metabolic changes in your body that Dr. Greg will be talking about that later when he talks about insulin resistance. But it does not help you. You need to say no. That's all. And that you're going to get it in a candy bar. And that you're going to get in some little, you know, all those Halloween candies left over that are all over your house. That is not true.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, though. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you're right. It does make a difference. Okay, now here's the key.
It does.
And this has been asked a bunch. I used to never hear about thyroid problems in general, but now I'm hearing about it all the time. Why is that? Should I be concerned for my own health? Can this system help? And we're getting that from a lot of women. And so just quickly, can you talk to us about why all of a sudden is everybody having a thyroid issue? Not everybody, but it's more common than it ever was.
Well, we see much more thyroid diseases, especially the farther away you are from the ocean level and the closer you are to the North Pole. We don't have the iodine in the water and the air. We can't breathe all that. And it is known that we have a thyroid belt in the upper parts of the nation. And another thing, what are we told every day? Don't eat salt. You have to lower your salt intake. And then sometimes people stop eating salt altogether. And not only that, if they buy salt or they consume it, they forget to buy the good salt that has the iodine that we need to, you know, supplement our thyroid. The thyroid is it's the gland that is the one that gives us energy, the metabolism. It increases the metabolism. So there are a lot of things that are important and are regulated by the thyroid. One thing it is important for us to know. There are two good ways to increase your metabolism in a natural way. One with exercise, and the other one is with food. So if you don't eat the right type of food, and you don't eat food at all, oh, I'm trying to follow the diet, but you're not consuming all the calories we're telling you. You are slowing down your metabolism. So you're exercising, you try to bring it up, you're not eating the right type of food, you're not eating enough. What are you doing? You're bringing down your metabolism. You're affecting your thyroid, and you need that support. The thyroid needs that support. So in order to be in balance, in homeostasis, we need to consume the right type of food, we need to exercise great, and we need to drink our fluids, and we need to flush the toxicities of our body. The thyroid, we could be talking about thyroid forever here, but it is very important. And this program, it is great because, one, it gives you the right type of foods to consume. Two, it tells you to exercise. And three, you're going to be hydrated. So you're going to be in balance, and the thyroid needs balance.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, and then here's the other question that we get, but it's actually a really good question that people want an answer as to why. I've noticed my heartburn and indigestion have disappeared, and I've dealt with that for decades. Why is it gone now? And we get this from men and women, just going, does it have to do with the supplementation, or does it have to do with the fact that for the first time in my life I'm really trying to get healthy? But they're excited about it. So why is everybody, their tummies in better shape now?
Yeah, Woodson, I think this is a combination of things. The products are excellent. They will dissolve once they get into the stomach in 94 seconds. They don't have any binders, any fillers, any artificial products, anything that's coating that's going to irritate your stomach. That's one thing to start. The quality of the products is excellent because they have been grown in the right soil. They have been picked at the right time and got processed so we can have it in the most pure way. And that's one of the things. The second thing is you're eating healthy foods. We're eating the foods that are going to keep us, again, in balance, because we're eating mostly from the plant kingdom, which is going to make us alkaline, decreases inflammation, and we're going to feel better. And for those who are taking MOA, which I recommend for my dieters, the reflux goes down to hardly anything. People who are taking medication for it twice a day have gone down to once, and sometimes they can skip it, which is fantastic. So I have seen the same thing, a reduction in gastrointestinal symptoms, especially the reflux, esophagitis. People are doing much better. I think it's a combination of the products, the food that we're encouraging people to take, and the supplementation is excellent.
Oh, that's fantastic. And guys, keep sending in your questions. And with that, that's our one page of questions this week, Dr. Elvira, that, oh my goodness, my phone is blowing up with text messages. Going, that was so great, I understood everything. And they loved hearing from you and hearing your take on that. And so we're going to start building on those and build some trainings off of those as well. And thank you so much. And now we're going to talk about how all of this translates into insulin resistance. And this is something I knew absolutely nothing about. And so, Dr. Elvira, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to switch gears to Dr. Greg. So, Dr. Greg, what is insulin resistance? How come none of us know about this? And this is something that really, I mean, when I learned how preventative this could be, had I just known, and for so many other people, can you talk to us about this and tell us what you got?
Oh, it's my pleasure, Woodson. How are you this evening?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much. And I know that you are in sunny Southern California.
Well, the sun's been down for a little while, but it was a gorgeous day again. And insulin resistance. I think I have this conversation maybe 3 or 4 times a day with my patients, and it really is. Sort of an all-pervasive problem. And I like this slide, evolution, okay, regardless of where you stand on the evolutionary process. But this slide, shows, on the far left, an ape, gradually evolving into a human form, and up until that second to the last gentleman, on the right there, a pretty normal-looking, robust individual, okay? And I like this slide for a number of reasons because, it demonstrates, quite clearly, that our forebears, and I'm talking about, up until the, to the sort of the machine age, okay, when we had to actually work to get our food, Okay, think about it. We literally had to work to get the food that we ate. And that meant, growing the food, milling it, processing it, cooking it, doing whatever we had to do to get the nutrients, the food that we had to eat. That took a lot of effort. And with the industrial age and with the commercialization of food in particular, it really doesn't take that much effort anymore. In fact, I guess, when we look at the United States, a very small portion of our income, meaning a very small portion of the time that we actually have to work to generate that income, goes towards the purchase of food. Okay, and so there's food all around us. It's not the best food, and Dr. Mike did a really good job talking about fast food. And it's not the kind of food that that we should be eating. Okay, so in the past we spent a lot of calories. We worked hard to grow the food that we ate, and now we're not burning those calories up, and we're eating foods that are very high in processed carbohydrates, what has happened is, for the vast majority of us, we have unleashed insulin resistance. Now, insulin resistance is something that we all have. It's built into us. And what it is, from a survival standpoint, it really is a good thing. Because our forebears, in times of feast, would build up a little extra fat reserves so that in times of famine, when food was scarce, they had extra calories stored up that they could rely on to survive until, food was available again. Well, guess what? In our society, we don't see famine, and in fact, our food is engineered so that it's loaded with sugar bombs and simple carbohydrates, and we have sort of been pushed into, a sort of, I don't know if we want to call it sort of an addictive type of behavior, but that's what it is, where we eat the wrong foods, we eat too many of the wrong foods, they leave us, satisfied for a very brief period of time, and that all has to do with insulin resistance. Let's advance the slide a little bit. Now, why is insulin important? Okay, we all know about insulin. Diabetics need insulin. But we produce insulin, our pancreas does, and there's a steady state of insulin, and then there's a bolus of insulin, a shot of insulin that the pancreas releases in response to a meal. Now, normal cells, and I'm talking about every cell in the body, with the exception of the cells of the heart and the cells of the brain, okay, those two organs do not have insulin receptors on them. What that does is that allows them to get first dibs on the sugar. So they have a very high metabolic rate. They require energy constantly, nonstop, 24/7. All of the other cells in the body, they can sort of wait their turn. And that what determines whether or not they get access to sugar is insulin. So when the sugar level is high enough, the pancreas secretes insulin. The insulin binds to a little, sort of like a keyhole on this insulin receptor. Once that key is in place, the channel opens up and sugar can go inside the cell. Now, normal cells, this will happen, without hesitation. And on normal cells, there are 20,000 receptor sites. Okay, but as the next slide shows, on cells that have insulin resistance, so those cells that have been bombarded with too much sugar constantly, for too long, okay, will actually lose about 3/4 of those receptors. They'll only have about 5,000 receptors on the cell surface, meaning that they'll be able to absorb less sugar, and they become less responsive. They don't respond to the insulin as quickly. What that means is two things. Your sugar levels stay higher longer, and your pancreas works harder to make more insulin because it doesn't know why the body isn't responding. It just knows that that sugar is still too high. And so it keeps making insulin, more and more insulin. That insulin eventually will trigger a response But guess which cells respond first? It's not the muscle cells. You know, they can utilize that sugar, you know, they can burn it up, you know, through muscular activity, or they can store it as glycogen. No, it's the fat cells that respond first. And guess what they do with those extra sugar calories? Well, they make sure it gets turned into extra fat for more storage. So let's move on to the next slide, Woodson. Now, it's a vicious cycle, and Dr. Mike touched on this a little bit. So you eat some fast food, something that's high in simple carbohydrates, you know, low in nutritional value. That causes your blood sugar to rise. The pancreas secretes insulin. The cells are not responsive to insulin. Okay, that sugar remains high. The pancreas makes more insulin, and pretty soon, all of a sudden, the fat cells open up their gates, they let the sugar in there, the sugar drops, and guess what? Okay, that leads to hunger. You have a craving again. And what do you want? Well, you want more of the same, you know, because it was satisfying the first time around, albeit for a short period of time, and you start the cycle all over again. Now, if this repeats often enough, okay, what's going to happen is it's going to further the insulin resistance, and pretty soon you're not going to have insulin resistance anymore. You're going to have overt diabetes, plus you're going to be carrying around a lot of extra fat, okay? And that fat tends to further the insulin resistance, and it actually makes it harder for you to lose the fat. So let's move on to the next slide, Woodson. Okay, what are the consequences? Well, okay, in men, it's that Dunlap belly, okay? The belly Dunlap over the belt, okay? And, you know, I see this time and time again, and I talk to my male patients. I ask them, when I know clearly that they're insulin resistant, I ask them, well, what size pants do you wear? Okay, and they'll say, oh, well, I wear a 34. Okay, and this gentleman, let's say he's wearing a 34-inch pant. Okay, well, I put my fingers, you know, right on the snap there, okay, and I draw a line from where the belly overlaps my fingers, okay, and in this gentleman it looks like it's about 3 inches, okay. Well, everybody, at least a lot of people know about high school algebra, and pi is 3.14. Well, 3 times 3 is 9. So let's keep it simple. You add 9 because that's the formula for circumference, you know, diameter times pi. You add 3 inches to diameter, you add 9 inches to circumference. So that 34-inch waist is now a 41-inch waist. And when we're talking about the metabolic syndrome, waist circumference is very important. In men, a waist circumference greater than 40 inches, and in women, a waist circumference greater than 35 inches is sort of the cutoff, okay? So if your waist circumference is greater than that figure, there's a very good chance that you have significant insulin resistance and or the metabolic syndrome, okay? Now, women, okay, the next slide, please, Woodson. You know, I see a lot of women who are concerned about their weight, okay, but the woman on the right, that woman with sort of the pear-shaped frame, okay, is perfectly healthy. Women are supposed to carry a little bit of extra fat, you know, in their hips and their upper thighs, you know, that's perfectly normal. The woman on the left, however, with that apple-shaped, you know, frame, is not healthy. And regardless, men or women, okay, if you have a waist to hip ratio, that means your waist circumference divided by your hip circumference. If that number is greater than 1, that means you have a problem, okay? So the woman on the right, her waist hip ratio has to be less than 1 because her waist is much smaller than her hip circumference. The woman on the left, however, I think her waist hip ratio is greater than 1, so she has a bit of a problem. So let's move on to the next slide. All right. So what are the metabolic consequences of insulin resistance? And I already talked about that waist to hip ratio. Okay, that is one of the parameters that we look at when we're talking about the metabolic syndrome. Okay, one of the first things we see, however, is an increase in serum triglycerides. So that insulin resistance, you know, the fat cells are making more triglycerides to be stored as fat. So we see an increase in triglycerides. And in fact, if you have fasting triglycerides greater than 150 on 2 separate occasions, there's about a 90 to 95% chance that you have insulin resistance just on the basis of that. Okay? We see a decrease in HDL cholesterol rather. We see an increase of blood pressure. Okay? And it's not really high blood pressure. A systolic blood pressure greater than 130 milligrams per deciliter, 130 milligrams of mercury, millimeters of mercury or higher is enough to indicate that there might be some insulin resistance. So the last thing that we see an increase in insulin, regardless, but we rarely measure that. But the last thing that we see is an increase in blood sugar. And why is that? Well, that's because the pancreas has a great capacity to keep pumping out insulin to try to keep that blood sugar under control. But once we see that fasting blood sugar greater than 110, okay, that's an indication that the pancreas is starting to lose steam, okay, that it's giving out. We've been working it too hard, okay? So 3 out of the 5 traits, that is a waist circumference greater than 40 in men, greater than 35 in women, triglycerides greater than 150, and HDL less than 40 in men, less than 45 in women, systolic blood pressure greater than 130, or as fasting blood sugar greater than 110, and the sugar's the last to rise, 3 out of the 5 give you the metabolic syndrome. And that greatly increases your risk for heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, and all sorts of other things that we really don't want. So let's move on. Woodson. So excess carbohydrates, excess weight causes this whole problem of insulin resistance, causes the metabolic syndrome, increases our risk for all sorts of problems, including heart attacks and strokes, polycystic ovarian disease, inflammatory diseases of the liver, and cirrhosis, fatty infiltration of the liver. We see that a lot. Hypertension, all sorts of problems caused by insulin resistance, okay, and this list only expands or increases when insulin resistance progresses to diabetes. So our goal here is, 1, combat insulin resistance head on. Okay, the MyGreat28 program does that because it reduces that simple carbohydrate load. You reduce the simple carbohydrates, your blood sugars don't rise as quickly as they once did. Your insulin production is decreased. Your body knows what to do with these nutrients. It doesn't store them away as fat. It utilizes them as building blocks and appropriate fuels. And guess what? You start to lose the fat. You start to lose that central fat that improves insulin resistance, makes it easier for you to stay on track because you're not in that on that treadmill anymore. You're not going from one high carbohydrate meal to the next because your blood sugars keep raising and dropping suddenly. So the next slide, I think, sort of sums this up a little bit. Well, this is what happens, in the progression to diabetes. So when we look at the blue line, that's blood sugar levels, okay? In a normal individual, when your blood sugar rises, your insulin production is able to keep track. That's on the far left. But as we were seeing with the insulin resistance, the blood sugar levels are kept fairly normal, but only because the insulin production continues to rise. Okay, that's the yellow line. When we reach a certain point, a tipping point where the pancreas can no longer produce enough insulin, that's when we start to see the blood sugar levels rise beyond the point of diabetes. Over time, insulin production continues to decrease. That leads to the need for exogenous insulin, shots of insulin, and all the while, this is being driven by that insulin resistance, which is the red line. The insulin resistance continues to increase steadily over time unless we change our behaviors. So the next slide sort of sums it up a little bit. This is not inevitable. Okay, and I tell all of my patients, you know, regardless of whether they're on insulin or not, okay, first of all, we don't want to put people on insulin. Okay, I resist it. I know from experience that with the proper nutrition, a restriction of these simple carbohydrates, we can actually reverse insulin resistance. We can stop the process. We can prevent the progression to diabetes and the need for insulin. In fact, there have been a number of very well done studies which demonstrate quite clearly that the single best way to prevent diabetes, okay, when you have the metabolic syndrome, is through nutritional support. The proper kind of nutrition, the right nutrients, balanced with a modest amount of exercise, by far the single best way to prevent the progression of the metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance to overt diabetes. So, and even the diabetic patients who are on insulin, once you're on insulin, most people think that that's it. You're going to stay on insulin forever. That is not necessarily the case. With a modest amount of weight reduction, getting rid of that fat, which is driving the insulin resistance, okay, getting rid of that fat, and sometimes as little as 5 to 10% of body weight can do it, you know, 10 to 15, 20 pounds. I've seen so many patients reduce the amount of insulin that they need, or in fact get off of it entirely. Okay, the choice is ours. Okay, but with the right kind of education, the right kind of nutritional support, it can happen.
That is so wonderful to know, because I always thought that was just doom to have something like that. And so the fact of what you were saying, that we are in control and it isn't inevitable, and that training was amazing. Insulin receptors, I mean, I had no idea, and all of the things to look out for. So tonight was jam-packed. We got a ton of stuff in 1 hour. Next week is going to be even better. Next week is our most requested topic that there is. Food labels, how to read them, how to shop, what to look for in the grocery store, and how we've all been tricked. So it's going to be a lot of fun next Sunday night. I promise you, people will be talking about it. So with all of this, we're going to sign off. Have a fantastic week. Get back on the wagon. Send us your questions. Send us your measurements. Send us your photos. And have a fantastic week, everybody. I appreciate you spending this time with us. And once again, Dr. Mike, Dr. Elvira, and Dr. Greg, thank you so much for everything that you're doing for us. We really appreciate it. And we're signing off, everyone. Have a super-duper night.
Thanks, Woodson. Thanks, Dr. Mike, Dr. Elvira. Have a great week.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
You too.
Night all.
Good night.